From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And coming up today out of Oklahoma State University, Derrell provides this week's cattle market insight. He'll talk about what the shutdown of the Tyson beef packing plant in southwest Kansas will mean for the cattle markets. And Derrell looks at the possible cattle market impact of this morning's USDA crop acreage report. Then K-State's Romulo Lollato is back to discuss his recent study of wheat variety traits and how they influence eventual yields. He combined variety performance data with information gathered from producers here in Kansas and surrounding states. And Jeff Wickman is in later with this week's 4-H segment, where K-State's Beth Hinshaw discusses the upcoming 48 Hours of 4-H Community Service Project. Here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Thanks for being along with us once again. Our cattle market segment is up first, and doing the honors this week, livestock economist Derrell of Oklahoma State University. And Derrell's going to touch upon several things, including the cattle market's attention geared toward the USDA crop production report later on today. We'll explain why that's relevant. But generally, recapping last week's trade, Derrell, it was not exactly an encouraging week for the market.
I think, both feeder and fed cattle markets are kind of in the same situation right now. It's August. We're in the dog days of summer, and I think these markets are trying to just kind of hang on here for another 2 to 3 weeks at least until we get to where we can kind of think about fall markets as opposed to these summer markets. So the fed cattle market has struggled. It's kind of come off of the bottom originally, and that may prove to be the bottom, but, if you look at the seasonal patterns historically, there's plenty of opportunity for this market to have a seasonal low here as we move towards Labor Day, this late August or very early September period. So it's kind of a matter of trying to hang on. The market does appear to be kind of consolidating a little bit. Feeder cattle markets, much the same situation. We haven't had a normal summer for bigger feeder cattle. We've struggled really to hold on to kind of a summer low instead of a seasonally higher price in late summer.
Do want to speak to a development over the weekend, and it's well publicized now, but the Tyson beef packing plant in southwest Kansas, just outside of Garden City at Holcomb, experienced a major fire over the weekend, and they're still sorting out the extent of the damage to that plant and how long it will be offline. Tyson has already announced that the operation will be suspended indefinitely, so that leaves a great lot to be desired as far as knowing what's happening going forward. When we have an interruption in processing like this at a major processing facility, what does that say to the market, Derrell?
Well, obviously, there'll be some fairly pronounced initial reactions, I would expect. Some of that just stems from the uncertainty of sort of knowing where we are and how long this thing might last and exactly what the path back from this will be. But, initially, obviously, when you lose 4 to 5% of the industry's slaughter capacity in this plant, that's going to disrupt two things. It's going to disrupt box beef supplies on the one hand. That'll begin to show up here just in the next few days without that flow of boxed beef product coming out there. So there'll be impacts certainly for specific firms and accounts and clients in that, but maybe perhaps more generally in the boxed beef market. On the other side, of course, fed cattle are coming in on a regular basis. The timing is such that, they really need to be slaughtered in a timely fashion. Cattle are just as perishable as meat in one sense of the word, in that when they're ready, they really need to go. So there may be some impacts there in terms terms of sort of shuffling things around. Other packers will no doubt attempt to make up some of the slack in that, but I don't know that there's a great ability for them to do that. And of course, there are logistical considerations of where you can move things to. Fortunately, there are at least a couple of other major beef plants not far from there, so that may help in that regard. If these cattle do get delayed a little bit in terms of reaching slaughter compared to what they would have, then we may add some weight to these cattle, so we may see some supply impacts there in terms of pushing these weights up, at least temporarily. So I think there'll be a significant number of impacts across the board in fed cattle markets and boxed beef markets this week. And again, as people try to sort out the uncertainty, and then longer term, we just have to wait and see whether this thing is something that is going to be relatively brief in nature versus something potentially that could be as long term as this plant's not going to get rebuilt and may in fact stay offline. There's no way to know at this point, and that's just pure speculation. But it could run that range of things from a couple of weeks to perhaps indefinitely.
Yeah. Now, purely speculatively, but if the plant were to not come back online ever, would there be an impetus to recreate slaughter capacity elsewhere, or is there enough shackle space out there now to compensate for the loss of such a large plant?
Well, given the overall expansion in cattle numbers and beef production that we've had in the last 5 years, we've reached a point, and there's been a lot of speculation over the last couple of years of whether we were approaching the limits of slaughter capacity, and that comes in the form of both plant capacity as well as things like labor capacity and other things. But I think there probably is, in general in the industry, there might be some impetus for maybe investing in a brand new plant. We haven't invested much in new plant infrastructure on the beef side in the U.S. in quite a long time. Most of these plants that we're using today were originally built 30-plus years ago, and they've been, of course, updated and expanded since then, but they're not new, and so it may well be that this is the time when a company like Tyson might make a consideration to make a brand new investment someplace.
Well, in any event, it's a major disruption as that Tyson plant at Holcomb being put out of commission over the weekend by that substantial fire and the ensuing damage. We'll watch what happens there. Derrell, the cattle trades are very much attuned to what's going to be shared by the USDA later today. That USDA World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report, that will, of course, include the crop plantings number that the USDA has reworked and prevented planting numbers as well, and what that will do to corn prices.
Certainly, there's a lot of attention on that. There's been so much uncertainty and a lot of focus on this report. I don't imagine that this report is going to resolve all the issues. It probably is. It's certainly going to help, and it's going to be a new number that the industry will work off of as far as trading the acreage side of things. But my guess is no matter what the number is, there will be a fair amount of people that disagree with it on one side or the other at any rate, and I think the uncertainty to some extent will continue beyond this. But it is a big report. Certainly a lot of focus on it, and obviously from a cattle market perspective, one source of uncertainty that continues to sort of weigh on the market a little bit is the fact that we don't know where we are with these corn markets, corn prices, and the implications that has for feedlot cost of production, cost of gain specifically as we go into the fall and winter.
So the volatility in the feed grain trades may persist for a while. As you talk with cattle feeders and those securing feedstuffs, they might be backgrounders as well. What's your general advice to them in navigating this particular market aspect to their benefit?
Well, there's a lot of risk out there. The risk, obviously, is that we could see significantly higher corn prices. On the other hand, we've actually seen corn prices come down from the initial run-up that we had over the last 6 or 8 weeks. And so, obviously there may be an opportunity to lock in some feedstuffs here. One of the things that I do hear that is happening, and that's going to be one of the things that limits this corn market to some extent. First of all, we know there's still a lot of old crop corn out in the country. Right now it's being held in pretty tight hands because producers that are holding that crop are trying to wait and see just how high this corn market might go. But eventually it's going to have to come to town in most cases by the time we get into harvest. So that's one thing that's probably going to cap this corn market as we go forward. The other thing is in the southern plains in particular, I'm hearing anecdotally that some feedlots are already beginning to turn to either more sorghum or wheat-based rations as the prices of corn have got up to a point where it makes that more feasible for them to consider. So again, that's probably something that will kind of limit the corn price impact going forward. So I suspect these producers are already looking at these alternative feeds and then figuring out where they need to get to as far as being set up for the fall cattle feeding period.
All right. One last item here. Wanted to get your take on the announcement a little over a week ago now that the U.S. and the European Union were going to agree to a new export beef trade deal, which would potentially open up that market even further in Europe for U.S. beef. Simply put, is this a big deal to the cattle trade, and if so, how much so?
Well, I think in the biggest picture sense of the word, this is probably not a major market changer. It's still a relatively small quantity. I think it's very important in terms of the ongoing attempts we've had to negotiate with the European Union for better access in that market. It's proven to be a very tough nut to crack, if you will, to get into that market. And there's been a lot of frustration on the U.S. side that we've not had access. So this agreement gives us a little bigger quantity and a little more certainty about access for a certain level of quantity. So it's all positive. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but I don't think in and of itself this is probably a major market changer for the overall beef industry.
But it does provide some relieving news for a market that could use some good trade input. Absolutely.
It's a very good thing from that standpoint. And you got to remember again that this is still non-hormone treated beef, so it's under the guise of that special program, which is again for specific producers. This provides additional opportunities there, but it's a little bit apart from the broader general U.S. beef market.
Very well. Derrell, as always, we appreciate your comments, and we'll touch base once again here in a few weeks. Many thanks to you.
You bet. Anytime.
He's a livestock economist at Oklahoma State University, Derrell Peel. He contributes regularly to our cattle market segment here on Agriculture Today. In a few moments, our next guest will offer a look at wheat variety traits and how, in more definitive terms, those lend to crop yields. He'll be with us next here on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. We're back now on this Agriculture Today. If you were tuned in last Friday, you'll know that we were talking with K-State wheat production specialist Romulo Lollato at that time about the findings of the ongoing survey project that he's involved with, asking Kansas wheat producers about their production practices and then relating those to the eventual yields that those producers are achieving. Well, Romulo's again with us today to follow up with still more information that he has generated, this time on wheat variety traits and how much weight those carry in eventual yield performance. And Romulo, this is quite illuminating work here, and its reach is farther than just the state of Kansas, but beyond our borders as well. You might explain what you've done.
Yeah, definitely. So that's another research project that I'm pretty excited about. And the idea came out, so we have all of these variety performance data that is collected every year by every state, right? And so they're typically reported as a page in an extension report, and producers can compare how the different varieties did in their region, and that's about it, right? We're really missing more depth on that analysis, looking across the years, and maybe more breadth of that analysis as well, looking at across environments. So with that idea in mind, I said, okay, let's go back. Let's get variety trial data all the way back into 2000. So we are collaborating with Oklahoma State University and Colorado State University. So we collected 18 years of variety performance data in over 700 trials that were conducted in this region through these 19 harvest years. And these added to over 100,000 yield observations.
Well, you're not lacking for data, are you?
No. Actually, we are lacking for time because we have too many ideas of what to do with this data and just one or two person working on it. And so so the first question that we had is, okay, if we divide this is a big region, right? Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. If we divide based on weather on regions that are more homogeneous or more similar among themselves, for example, South Central Kansas would get merged with North Central Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. Northwest Kansas would get merged with Northeast Colorado, because there's no reason to maintain that state boundary, really. We're just looking at the weather data and letting the weather tell us how to make that division. And so the first step that we wanted to do is, okay, see how are the management practices affecting yields on this huge database. And second, what are the variety traits in each one of these regions that are of interest. So very briefly here, I'll give you the example of Northwest Kansas and Northeast Colorado there as one of the regions that we were looking. By far, the first management practices that were affecting yields was the water regime, so whether the trial was irrigated or dryland, right? And in irrigated trials, the yields ranged from 83 to 89 bushels per acre, depending on planting date. So essentially for Northwest Kansas, trials that were planted after the 23rd of September were yielding more than trials that were planted before that. So irrigated trials planted after 23rd of September resulting in higher yields. If we look at the dryland trials now, the first effect that was actually more important within those dryland trials was fungicide application. So trials that got sprayed with foliar fungicide at flag leaf were actually yielding about 74 bushels per acre on average, which was much higher than trials that did not get sprayed. That ranged from 42 to 52 bushels per acre.
Quite a difference.
Yes, a huge difference. And so in those trials that ranged from 42 to 52 there, that were not sprayed, really the early planted trials were yielding the least. So trials that got planted before the 13th of September, they were yielding the least, and delaying sowing date actually improved yields. So this is just an example there for Northeast Colorado and Northwest Kansas. We have a lot of other trials as well. So just another example that is a very important wheat growing region as well. That's South Central Kansas, and as we go into North Central Oklahoma, again, foliar fungicide was the main thing affecting yields. So trials that got sprayed yielded about 61 bushels per acre in that region. Trials that did not get sprayed yielded between 36 and 48 bushels per acre, so much less. And then it depended on the purpose of the trial. So dual-purpose trials yielded much less than everything else. They were averaging about 36 bushels per acre. And in the grain-only trials, the most important factor there was sowing date. So the optimal sowing date was that between the 5th and the 13th of October for that South Central Kansas, North Central Oklahoma region. So it's a very interesting way to look at the data and try to learn and bring these data to producers as far as how is the management practice actually affecting our yields in these last 19 years in the region. But also we're looking at variety traits,
which dovetail with your management practices, of course, and those most assuredly make a difference, but you're trying to measure the magnitude of that difference, it sounds.
Definitely, yeah. So in the variety traits there, as you mentioned, it really interacted with our management. So, for example, if we go back to that Northwest Kansas, Northeast Colorado dryland region there, in dryland trials, the most important variety traits, surprisingly, was drought tolerance, right?
It's a shock. But
yeah, it's a shock, but at least the data is telling us that as well, right? So definitely, producers need to be looking for that. Irrigated trials, stripe rust showed up as the most important thing. So definitely, and stripe rust also showed up in the dryland trial. So definitely something that we need to keep in mind. Coleoptile length out in western Kansas was also a very important variety trait associated with some more successful varieties out there. So overall, if we look at this entire region, right, stripe rust resistance was by far the most important trait. But then we had coleoptile length showing up as very important. winter hardiness as well, varieties with good winter hardiness. Drought tolerance as well was really showing up. Then maturity, so heading date of the variety was also, and again, it depended on the region. But again, it's a very exciting project. They were trying to learn more, and the variety traits, they are of successful varieties. They depend both on the region and also on the management. So it really shows that interaction of the variety that we need to be selecting to fit the management that we have as well as the region where we are at.
It all pieces together, and it lends to the idea, which has been clear to producers for a long time, that more strategic management can pay off in better wheat productivity, certainly over the many seasons, if not just one season.
Definitely. Is the system-specific management there, considering the region where the farm is located, of course, and then best management practices for that region. And we definitely have enough variability in our varieties now that we can be picky and select a variety that is specific for that management practice that fits your growing conditions.
All right. Well, we know you will be covering the very information you've been passing along to us today at that series of pre-plant wheat schools for producers that K-State will be hosting over these next couple of weeks. And we would also note, with regard to variety selection, that right here on tomorrow's broadcast, we will have your colleague, Jane Lingenfelser of K-State Agronomy Mike's Side, going over specifically the findings of the 2019 K-State wheat variety performance tests. So we hope folks will be tuned in for that. Meantime, good travels on that pre-plant wheat school circuit ahead, and many thanks once again for being along with us, Romulo.
Thank you, Eric. That's
wheat production specialist Romulo Lollato, K-State Research and Extension. As a footnote, another of Romulo's colleagues is imploring of you wheat producers right now to start taking measures, if you haven't already, against that flush of volunteer wheat growth out there in your wheat stubble. Here's K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth.
Well, I have received several calls about wheat stubble, and guys are going out looking, trying to think about controlling their volunteer wheat, and something's feeding on the pigweed. I mean, it's doing a number on the pigweed, and that's the alfalfa webworm, or the whatever you want to call it. It's the webworm that gets in our soybeans also. They're feeding on the pigweed. No, it's not going to be a beneficial insect because they do eat on alfalfa and soybeans and other things. But at the same time, get rid of the volunteer. We're starting to see very, very flush fields of volunteer wheat. And volunteer wheat's where all of our wheat pests reside. And over summer, the flaxseed for the Hessian fly and just the wheat curl mite, Russian wheat, I mean, all of our pests, the diseases, the everything utilizes volunteer wheat. So if you can, keep the volunteer wheat down, especially 2 weeks prior to planting.
That reminder from K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. And this quick note ahead of the break. Today is the final day to pre-register for K-State's Kansas River Valley Experiment Field 2019 Fall Field Day. It's set for tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the evening at the Rossville Field along U.S. Highway 24. Weed management in soybeans, split late-in applications for corn, cover crop management for weed suppression, and making the most of the Mesonet weather information from K-State. Covered on that program, followed by the catered barbecue meal. But you need to, again, register in advance for that meal count. Call the Shawnee County Extension Office today to do so. 785-232-0062. 785-232-0062. The Fall Field Day at the Kansas River Valley Experiment Field, coming up at the Rossville Field tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock. This is Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And continuing on now with today's agricultural news headlines for you. These courtesy in part of DTN. Well, President Trump raised the possibility that trade talks with China could break off again. In comments to reporters on Friday, the president indicated that the U.S. was prepared for Beijing to back out of the talks, which were tentatively set to take place in Washington next month. U.S. and Chinese negotiators held face-to-face meetings in Shanghai last month, but failed to make any progress there. In response, the president has ordered 10% tariffs on $300 billion in Chinese imports, not currently taxed, to take effect on September the 1st. On Monday, China lets the value of its currency decline, leading to the U.S. accusing Beijing of manipulating its currency, the president insisting that China was bearing the brunt of the trade war by crimping its exports to the U.S. The Environmental Protection Agency announced on Friday it was issuing 31 small refiner exemptions to the renewable fuel standard for the 2018 compliance year. The agency received 40 requests for the 18 compliance year, and prior to Friday, data showed that 2 of those had been withdrawn or declared ineligible. The data now show that 31 have been granted, 6 denied, and 3 were withdrawn or declared ineligible. The data also show that the EPA has now denied a request for the 2016 compliance year and one for the 17 compliance year that had previously been showing as pending in the data up until Friday. These 31 requests granted for the 18 compliance year, down from 35 granted for the 17 year, still above the 19 approved for the 16 compliance year. As expected, the news has not been welcomed by biofuel supporters. House Agriculture Committee Chairman Colin Peterson expressed disappointment at the data released on Friday. And other biofuel backers offered similar negative reactions, including the Kansas Corn Commission, which pointed to reports that this action will eliminate demand for at least 1 billion gallons of ethanol. That would be the equivalent of over 350 million bushels of corn. Kansas Corn Growers Association CEO Greg Krisick said the waiver announcement adds to an already difficult year for farmers because of planting problems, the trade disputes, and low prices. Greg said, "We will continue to fight for the reallocation of those lost gallons back into the RFS." Producers receiving market facilitation program payments this year, regardless of if from round 1 or round 2, will need to report that as part of their 2019 income taxes. Here's more on that from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Many ag producers will be facing some unique income circumstances in tax year 2019 when it comes to preparing their taxes, including receipt of market facilitation program payments. And Ohio State University Extension expert Barry Ward says,
"We have to claim these payments in the year that we receive them."
Ward says some producers deferred reporting 2018 production and in turn will report first-round MFP payments as 2019 taxable income. And as for many of those producers,
we're going to receive at least 50% of this market facilitation payment in 19 as well, the second round, if you will. So we're going to have a lot of this income that's going to fall in 19 for some growers.
Yet unlike last year, producers will not have the option of delayed reporting and delayed payments. That's because second-round market facilitation payments are contingent upon planted acreage reporting of eligible crops, whereas first-round MFP payments were based on yield reporting. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And Bayer AG has not proposed an $8 billion settlement for Roundup herbicide lawsuits. A mediator appointed to Bayer's case said that on Friday. A report published by Bloomberg said Bayer's shares went soaring as much as 11% earlier in the day as investors welcomed the prospect that the thousands of lawsuits alleging Bayer's Roundup caused cancer could be put to rest. But Kenneth Feinberg, a mediator appointed by a federal judge to try to resolve the case, said that Bayer, Monsanto, and the plaintiff's lawyers haven't yet begun to discuss dollars. He said, quoting him, "It's pure fiction," in talking of the Bloomberg report. A Bloomberg spokesperson said, quoting her, "We stand by our story." Bayer declined to comment on Feinberg's statement on the report that it was willing to pay up to $8 billion to settle the Roundup lawsuits. Feinberg said the mediation process will continue into next month. Next for you on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of Tree Tales. Here's K-State forester Bob Atkinson. Bob?
Silvopasture is one of several agroforestry practices that improve both economic and conservation benefits for farmers and ranchers. It is a deliberate integration of trees and grazing livestock operations on the same land. These systems are intensively managed for both forest products and forage, providing both short and long-term income sources. Well-managed silvopastures employ agronomic principles, typically including introduced or native pasture grasses, fertilization, and nitrogen-fixing legumes, along with rotational grazing systems that employ short grazing periods that maximize vegetative plant growth and harvest. The annual grazing or haying income helps cash flow the tree operation while the tree crop matures. While these systems can require a number of management activities, the benefits can make it worthwhile. One of the main advantages of silvopasture systems is reducing heat stress in livestock, which improves animal performance and well-being. Kansas State University beef veterinarian A.J. Tarpoff is encouraging producers to take extra measures to protect their herds during our recent temperatures exceeding 100 degrees across the state. Tarpoff noted that the beef industry loses an estimated $369 million each year due to the effects of heat stress. Silvopasture systems can reduce those losses. It is important to note that not every pasture in a livestock enterprise needs to be a silvopasture to take advantage of the benefits of this integrated system. Silvopastures can also increase wildlife diversity and improve water quality. The forage protects the soil from water and wind erosion while adding organic matter to improve soil properties. Silvopasture provides an attractive landscape with an aesthetic, pleasing park-like setting. The Kansas Forest Service is available to help producers plan and design silvopasture systems. For more information, contact the Kansas Forest Service at 785-532-3300 or check us out on the web at www.kansasforest.org. This is Forester Bob Atkinson encouraging you to take care and manage our Kansas woodlands and windbreaks. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Bob. Jeff Wickman and his guest are awaiting to bring you this week's 4-H segment, next on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. 48 Hours of 4-H is an annual event challenging 4-H members to give back to their communities by identifying service projects, then tackling those projects the second weekend in October, which this year is October 12th and 13th. Southeast Area 4-H specialist Beth Hinshaw says 48 Hours of 4-H is making a difference in Kansas communities.
Yes, we are in the 5th year of the 48 Hours of 4-H program. This is a project of the Kansas 4-H Youth Leadership Council, and even back when they started it as a challenge to 4-H members all across Kansas on how much service can we do for our communities in one weekend.
And really part of this also involves working with the community to identify those projects and to get them to participate as well.
Yes, we definitely want young people to know about their community. And when we think about Kansas 4-H, we use our Kansas 4-H formula, and that community vitality, that is one of our priorities. And we want young people to exhibit leadership and civic engagement. And so knowing what's going on in their community, knowing what is needed in their community, those are important skills that go with community vitality.
I guess one of the first things then is to maybe get a leadership team set up and identify the project.
Definitely, and I will tell you that this happens all kinds of different ways across Kansas. We have some districts that take on a project or several projects as an entire district. We have that happen in counties as well. We have other places where a club puts together a team and then their club does an activity. And we have still other places where a family does an activity and maybe invites another 4-H family to take part. So it is important to start with some kind of a leadership plan, who's going to be in charge and who's going to figure out what the project is. One of the things that's important to us is we want all of the projects registered so that when it comes time to do 48 hours of 4-H, we know what's going on out across the state. The other thing that's important is once it's all over, we want people to come back and tell us what it is that they did as well, and that's through a reporting system.
And a lot of this is done online.
Yes, most definitely. You register online, and then you also report online as well.
I know that this has been going on for several years, so some of the clubs probably have some projects that they like to do or that they know about, but what are some of the more common things that people are doing?
There is such a nice wide variety of projects across the state, and then every year there's something new that happens. But some of the standards are, we have a number of clubs and groups that work on collecting food for a food pantry. After a long summer, sometimes those food pantries are kind of empty, especially before the holidays where all those new drives kick in. One of the really popular projects that young people take part in is projects for their local animal shelter. So that might be cleaning at the animal shelter. It might be doing a supply drive for the animal shelter. We know that children love animals, and so that's a very popular project. There are some other things that young people have done, especially like using their project skills, maybe sewing lap quilts for a nursing home, maybe baking cookies as a thank you gift for first responders or others in their community. Those are just a few examples. And when I look at our results from last year, we had over 7,700 items collected across the state. Over $24,000 was collected for all kinds of different causes. We had over 2,000 people involved. Another thing was we had 88 new 4-H members recruited or involved. And so we love that this happens during National 4-H Week, and it's such a great opportunity to get new people involved in 4-H with a project right away.
Those are really exciting numbers and really impressive numbers.
Yeah, it is really amazing what you can do when you all are focused on one goal. And so we try to keep numbers every year of the different projects that happen, and that's why it's really important that people report so that we know that.
The other thing is getting the word out that this project is being done and then kind of promoting it as they're doing it.
Definitely, and some of the options for that, they can certainly do a local press release on that or, let local partners know. And a lot of our groups do their service activity in conjunction with some local partners, and so that certainly helps get the word out. We also have an option where they can order T-shirts that say 48 hours of 4-H on them, and so that's another option, when everybody's wearing their T-shirt doing the activity.
One of the things I think you pointed out is the fact that this really allows them to utilize a lot of the skills that they learn in 4-H.
Most definitely. Certainly organizing a project, we teach all kinds of leadership skills, and that's a great opportunity for young people to use them. And then, as I said, there's all kinds of project skills, be it gardening or foods and nutrition, possibly clothing or sewing. Those are all projects that they can use those same skills and then in some way serve their community.
They can go to the 4-H website and they can start that registration process right now.
That is correct. And we would love to have people go ahead and get their project registered because that just gives them more time to actually get it all planned. And there will be a planning guide up there. And then in addition to that, there'll be a page that you could print off or at least look at that shows you what all the important dates are for 2019. like when we would like to have your project registered and the deadline to order your shirts, when your shirts will come, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on the website, so that's a great place to start.
Most definitely. And then I would also say that we also have a Facebook event, so if people would indicate that they're going to 48 Hours of 4-H, and that can be anywhere across the state, they'll get updates through that as well.
This is the time to really start planning so that you're ready to go and you've got that date all locked in.
Yes, county fairs are kind of coming to an end, and we know back to school is coming, and when it's back to school time, we think about how exciting the brand new 4-H year is. And 48 Hours of 4-H happens right at the end of National 4-H Week. So the dates this year are October 12th and 13th, and we sure hope that a lot of 4-H families will take part all across the state.
That's Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Again, for more information, go to kansas4h.org or contact your county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.